Jesus turned the conventional wisdom of his time and of ours upside down. When Jesus got through talking, those who were listening to him had to change the perspective on what they had just listened to him talk about. This was true even from his having been a king born in a stable to his experience at the cross when he could have called down 10,000s of angels to have delivered him, but he simply didn't do that. Jesus did the unconventional, and Jesus taught the unconventional. On two different occasions, he turned what we imagine to be leadership or what we imagine to be someone of importance into something quite different, because he made this statement that those who will be chief or those who will be great among you, that they are to be the servant of all. Now that's a very different mindset than what we see in government, what we see in business, what we see in politics, and any number of other ways. Hello, I'm Carlton Kuhn, the writer of the Upside Down Pyramid series of lessons. My goal for our time together is, number one, for you to gain some perception about what servanthood really looks and acts like. And then obviously, I hope out of this you become, if you're not now, you become a servant who finds a way to serve the Lord Jesus Christ by serving people. To accomplish what we've set out to do, we're going to kind of travel four different paths. We're going to, first of all, identify servanthood, and we're going to just take a look at some people who were servants. Secondly, we're going to discover who it is that we really should serve, but then we also have to talk about how that is discovered. How is that presented? How is that actually accomplished then? And third, we're going to give some perspective to the perils of what life is like in being a servant. And truly, there are perils in a life of servant. And finally, we're going to take a look at the rewards. And again, just as there are perils, there are rewards. So let's dive in today to just take a look at how servanthood really functions. When Saul was the king of Israel, there came a time when the Philistines were coming against them, and Israel was truly in a bad way. They only had 600 soldiers. They had 2 swords among the 600 soldiers. In the meantime, the Philistines were a much larger mass. They had a much larger army, and further, they were well armed. They had all the weapons that were necessary. Well, I guess to add to the situation, it seemed that King Saul really didn't have a whole lot of a strategy or plan for what he was going to do. And in all of this, Saul's son, his name was Jonathan, he had one of the 2 swords, and he decided, I'm gonna do something. And so he leans to his armor bearer, his military servant, and said, we're going to attack the Philistines. And I could see the wheels turning, I could imagine it. With this military servant, we're going to attack. I mean, the 2 of us. But whether that was what he thought or not, he instead gave affirmation, and he declared to Jonathan, I'm with you. I'll go alongside you, and I'll go to battle with you. It was an interesting thing that whenever they went to the conflict, Jonathan didn't go by himself, but his servant, his armor bearer, went alongside him. It's also interesting that the servant is never mentioned. I mean, his name's never mentioned. We don't know who he is. Jonathan gets accolades and acclaim for what he accomplished that day, because between the 2 of them, they provided a victory that resulted in the enemy being put to flight. Not just the 20 that they killed were destroyed, but some energy flowed into the people of Israel, and that day they overcame the Philistines. But it wasn't just Jonathan alone. It was Jonathan in partnership with a servant. That's what servanthood looks like. There's several observations I would make in this. Number one, servanthood often takes us into roles of involvement that maybe we're not real comfortable with. They may stress us and stretch us. The second observation that I would make is that in spite of that stress or pressure, a true servant says, I'm going. I'm on your side. This may be a challenge, but I'm up for it. Third thing that I see in this particular servant is that he took on the encourager's role. Let's go do it. And that, of course, is my paraphrase of what he was saying. And then fourth, the servant didn't just give him verbal encouragement, but he went alongside him. And there was great victory that was won. That is an Old Testament picture of the concept that Jesus presents when he talks about those who are going to be the chief or those who are going to be the greatest. Let them be the servant of all. That servant spirit, that servant attitude. So if you're looking to identify the model of servanthood, you can find it here. Here's a man unknown to history, a man who was able to hear and keep the confidence that Jonathan had in him, was able to be an encourager and went alongside to go into the conflict. What I see here is that what's described isn't really all that difficult. It doesn't take a college degree. You don't even need a preacher's license to accomplish any of these things. They're all accessible to every person who will ever see this video. You have the privilege of serving in some way. Servanthood requires nothing grand. It requires no relocation to Africa or Asia. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to some great city in North America. You can serve right where you are in the situation that you currently are living in. I've given you one example today of what we're talking about. Of course, there are many others. Jesus himself was an incredible example of servanthood. I find it also interesting that Paul, on 3 different occasions, introduces one of his epistles by including Paul a servant. Think about that. Paul was many things. He was an author. He was a great missionary. He was a church planter. Incredible man of God, an apostle, one to whom had been delegated apostolic power and apostolic authority, but he introduces himself to Romans, the Philippians, and also to Titus as this servant. As we begin this journey into servanthood, I want you to know that you can make a difference. If you can find a way to serve God by serving others, you've accomplished what we're reaching for. And guess what? I think that all of us can do that. So let me ask some probing questions. Are you willing to accept that you, like Jonathan's servant, are not going to get a whole lot of public affirmation, that you may never have your name mentioned from the pulpit? If you work in the nursery, or you clean the church, or you're responsible for taking care of the church lawn or the flowers out front, guess what? You may never be mentioned at all. That's part of the way servanthood really works. The second question, because I see it in what Jonathan had happen with his servant, is can you be trusted with a confidence? Jonathan told this man what he was going to do, and there was quite a bit of pressure on them to just stay idle, but he could be trusted. Servants can always be trusted. Third, how great is your commitment to this thing? Are you willing to participate yourself? Fourth, are you willing to be an encourager? Because serving sometimes is just picking up the phone and making that call. It's sending a text message. Just days ago, as I was preparing for a Sunday morning service, I guess it was just minutes before the service started, my phone lit up with a text message from a friend from a distant port who said, "You're on my mind today. I felt to pray for you." Well, it was one of those more difficult Sundays, if you understand what I mean. I needed that encouragement, and that gentleman served me on that Sunday with just that word of encouragement. You can do that, and you can do that right now. So let's just get this started right. Servanthood is the basis of Christian impact, and you can be a person of Christian impact simply by serving.